Good morning.
Devil May Cry.
Who exactly is this cloaked person? Why did he rip off Nero's arm? When did this happen? How did he get here? And for what purpose does he need it? That and much more in this video. Hey, what's up good people, it's YellowMotion here and welcome to my Devil May Cry 5 character analysis and breakdown video, as I'm going to give you a complete overview into the various characters we've seen in the trailer, and I'll also give you my thoughts and opinions as well. In this video, I'll be mainly talking about Nero and the cloaked person we see in the trailer, but before that, make sure to watch my first breakdown video, where I talked about Dante and the new demon villain, as this video will have a follow-up on that of course. So let's get right into it.
This is a trial from the heavens above.
Let's kick things up with Nero, as at the end of DMC4, Nero and Dante had their final conversation with each other, as Dante left unknown to Nero where he was headed to next. And now with Devil May Cry 5 as a direct sequel to DMC4, several years have passed since then, and we see a new revamped Nero being back with a fresh new look and design, with his short white spiked hair and his dark blue jacket. And his new look already gives him much more personality and makes him much more unique as to how he already looked in Devil May Cry 4. And according to Hideaki Itsuno, the director of Devil May Cry 5, he wanted to portray two important things with Nero's new look and design. First, he wanted to make him look much more younger than Dante, which is pretty obvious of course if you see them both together and compare. But also for the newcomers, Itsuno wanted to portray Nero as a very stylish and a very cool character, both in looks and in personality that would be loved and liked. And he's done a pretty good job on that as well, based on what we've seen so far in the trailer, as Nero is clearly much more matured and confident than how he was in Devil May Cry 4. But the second and probably the most important thing he wanted to express with Nero's new look is that he is Vergil's son. So especially for the longtime fans, they would notice and resemble him to his father, Vergil, as he was very pleased when the fans saw the similarities in appearance between Nero and Vergil, and even stating that they altered Nero's looks in a way to give a more resemblance to Vergil, as the short white hair with his blue jacket of Nero are pretty much the trademarks of Vergil himself. Then again, this is no news for the longtime fans of Devil May Cry, as many hints were given throughout DMC4, and especially with the special edition, such as him having the blood of Sparta and him being the one to resurrect Yamato. And even in Vergil's ending, you could see Nero's devil trigger as the shadow of Vergil, but there are many other references and hints and confirmations, as Nero was already pretty much confirmed in the Graphic Arts 3142 art book of Devil May Cry, stating that Nero is in fact Vergil's son. And even now in the latest Pachinko game, where they made brand new CG cutscenes for Devil May Cry 4, there's a scene when Nero goes into his devil trigger form, but instead it's Vergil behind him, also indicating that it's his son. But now it's finally good to know and see that Hideaki Itsuno is confirming that Nero is his son by just presenting the way he is and looks in Devil May Cry 5. As now he has his own demon hunting agency, together with his partner in crime Nicoletta Goldstein. You see, although this isn't shown in the game's ending of Devil May Cry 4, however in the novelization called Deadly Fortune, Nero decides to open a demon hunting business, and for that Dante gives him a neon signboard that says Devil May Cry, as Nero officially became a professional demon hunter, and that sign is incorporated into Devil May Cry 5 as we can see it in the trailer. So the van that Nico is driving is pretty much their office. And we also get to see some cool Easter eggs on the van, such as the number 5 after the neon sign, indicating DMC5. And on the tires of the van are also the brand of Devil May Cry. We don't know exactly what happened to Nero in those few years after Devil May Cry 4, besides him opening a demon hunting agency and getting his arm ripped off in the process. But what we know so far are Nero's main objectives in the game. First, he wants to regain his lost pride and his stolen power, which is most likely referring to losing his Devilbringer arm, as that was his main source of power to begin with. So of course he also wants to settle a score with the man who took off his arm. The producers also said that Nero left someone behind. Now it's pretty vague to who that someone exactly is, as it could be someone he encounters at Redgrave City during the demonic invasion. Maybe it's Morrison, or maybe it's the mysterious character V. There isn't much we know at the moment. but it sounds like it's someone very important, so we'll see. So now we know a bit of Nero's side of the story, let's have a look at his arm. First of all, Nero loses of course his arm because we saw it being ripped off by a mysterious cloaked character. And as many of you, including myself, I'm fully convinced since the debut trailer that this character is none other than Vergil. But it's not just Vergil, it's actually corrupted Vergil. And to me there's a difference. And the reason he ripped off Nero's arm is because of Yamato that's inside his Devilbringer arm. As after all, in the ending of Devil May Cry 4, it's Dante who's giving Vergil's Yamato blade to Nero, and Nero simply absorbs Yamato into his Devilbringer. So the question is now, when did this happen? How did he get here? And why exactly does Vergil need Yamato? For that we need to know and see what happened to Vergil throughout the years, and what exactly the Yamato and Nero's Devilbringer are, and how they are pretty much all connected with each other. As from there, I'll dive more into the topics so that everything comes together and hopefully answer some of the questions that I raised right now and give you my thoughts on them. Okay, so first of all, the event of Nero's arm being ripped off is how actually the story of Devil May Cry 5 will begin, as it's been confirmed by Itsuno himself. So yeah, the cutscene we're seeing in the trailer is part of that, and it's pretty much a prologue leading up to the events of the demonic invasion in Red Grave City. It's also most likely that Nero has already met Nico in this prologue. As you can see, the DMC van is inside the garage, as Nico and Nero probably teamed up together to set up their demon hunting agency. I do think that the time that has passed might be several months, and pretty much when the demonic invasion happens is the first time that Nero uses his new arm. Nero was actually born with a Devilbringer on his right arm, and apparently his arm was changed as a result of it being possessed by an evil force, as Nero thought that he had injured his arm and an infection had spread, so he bandaged it up to keep it hidden all the time. But at some point he realized that he actually had power, and he eventually used the power and trained with it in secret. And later on, as Nero was about to die, his Devilbringer resonated with the broken Yamato and restored it.
That day forth, my arm changed. One second. Power. Give me more. Power.
Also, one thing noteworthy is that Nero's Devilbringer is actually different in Devil May Cry 5. As you can see, it's not only with its colors, but pretty much the whole design is quite different. There is still a blue glow inside his whole arm that spreads out, but it doesn't go through its wrist anymore, like in DMC4. Also, his fingers aren't glowing. And Nero's Devilbringer is also much more black and not red. It could either mean that it has further evolved more in those several years after DMC4, or it has begun to worn out its powers. Or I think it's a simple redesign made for DMC5, but I'll come back to that later. The Yamato is Vergil's trademark Dark Forge blade. It was once wielded by his father, Sparda, and was left to Vergil as a keepsake. Vergil used Yamato to reactivate Taman Negru, and at the end, he and his Yamato fell into the demon world. And some point later in time, Yamato was found shattered by the Order of the Sword in Devil May Cry 4. It was then restored and taken by Nero when his Devilbringer resonated with the broken Yamato. However, it is taken back from him by Sanctus when he is absorbed into the Savior, and then used by Agnes to reopen the true Hellgate to the Underworld. After defeating Agnes, Dante retrieves Yamato and uses it to destroy the Hellgate. Dante then uses the blade to free Nero and sends it back to him so that he can finish the fight against Sanctus. And after the final battle, at the end of DMC4, Nero absorbs the Yamato within his Devilbringer, as Dante is giving it to him as a gift to keep. And that's where Yamato is now. Ever since Vergil has lost it in the Underworld, it's now in Nero's Devilbringer. And that brings me to the Cloaked Person in the trailer as we see him rip off Nero's arm, the Devilbringer. As mentioned before, I'm very positive and convinced that it's none other than Vergil himself, as in fact it's corrupt Vergil to be exact, as I was already pretty sure convinced since I saw the trailer of Devil May Cry 5. His white face, blue veins, cracked hands, gloves, straps, blue coat and boots are all pretty much the design trademarks of Vergil from DMC3 and DMC4. and I hope that it's pretty obvious for everybody that it's indeed him, as with the many similarities we've seen so far. But I don't want to leave it there, as there are quite some interesting things to see and look at, but also leave room to think about as far as his design, and to further speculate on what has happened to him after Devil May Cry 1. So first, let's start off with a visual comparison. If you look at the gloves, button knobs, sleeves, they are all pretty much trademarks of Vergil's design. But then again, they are different than what Vergil usually had in his DMC3 and DMC4 design. For example, if we look at the gloves, we see that these have knuckle holes, which Vergil doesn't have in either his DMC3 or DMC4 design. And you can also see his cracked hands much better. We also see Vergil's typical button knobs and sleeve straps, but here they are 3 instead of the usual 5. And even the button themselves that's on them is different than the one from DMC4. But what's interesting that it's actually the same button knob as the one that Vergil usually has on his side of his coat and not on his sleeve. Also, his boots appear to have more straps than the original 2 ones he had in DMC3 and DMC4. And now it looks like to be 6 straps instead of 2. Also, the long wide pattern design he has on his coat never went past down his sleeve, and somehow he has that sign on both of his sleeves now, as you can see here on his left and right side. What's also catching my eye is that his coat is sort of mixed, or it could be just worn out or dirty, as the upper part isn't fully blue, as the colors have been washed out. But as he rips off Nero's arm from this shot, we see the blue parts on his coat being more fully visible and much more clean and vibrant. First, I thought that it might be the illumination that comes from the Devil Bringer itself, since it's illuminating a blue light, but it shouldn't be as much as this, as the 2 parts of his coat are clearly indicating a difference. Maybe it's done on purpose, who knows? So with all the differences in his design, does it mean that this person isn't Vergil after all? Well, no, I'm still fully convinced that it's him, but I think that most of the differences that we see here are part of a redesign change. You see, just like I pointed out how Nero's Devilbringer arm was completely different than how it looked in DMC4. And it's not only with those things. As you can see, Nero's Red Queen sword and his Blue Rose revolver are also redesigned and quite different and even smaller, since quite a lot of things have been redesigned into a more modern take in Devil May Cry 5, with a more realistic design and aesthetic applied to the assets of the game. The trademark characteristics remain still the same, but their overall look is now different. And I'm simply assuming that this also applies to Vergil's classic outfit that we've used to see in the previous games. But you have to remember that here it's actually old and worn out as well, since after all the last time Vergil had this outfit before he went into the Underworld was in DMC3, and that is in timeline aspects more than 20 years ago.
I'm staying. This place was our father's home.
In Devil May Cry 3, Vergil used Yamato to reactivate Tamen Negru, and at the end, he and his Yamato fell into the demon world. When Vergil wakes up in the room of the Fallen Ones, still wounded from his earlier battle with Dante, 3 glowing orbs appear. Vergil recognizes them as those belonging to the Prince of Darkness, the Demon Emperor Mundus, as Vergil smiled and said that,
"If my father did it, I should be able to do it too."
Though the battle between Vergil and Mundus was never shown, Mundus got the upper hand and defeated him, as he lost, most likely due to him still being wounded from his previous battle with Dante, and thus he got controlled and brainwashed by him into becoming a servant and commanded by Mundus, as from then on Vergil would be known and reborn as Nelo Angelo. In Devil May Cry, Nelo Angelo first appears to Dante as a reflection in the bedroom mirror, from which he emerges and challenges Dante to a duel. Vergil doesn't recognize Dante as he is brainwashed by Mundus, and of course Vergil is completely unrecognizable to Dante in this form, nor does he expect to see his brother at all. They fight and Nelo manages to defeat Dante, and as he was about to deliver the final strike, Dante's amulet slips out, and the sight of it suddenly awakens Vergil's memories. causing him pain and forcing him to flee. Vergil returns to challenge Dante a second time, but is defeated again and forced to flee. But when Nelo Angelo returns for a third time, Dante remarks on his honorable personality and questions why such a person would serve Mundus.
A man with guts and honor. I like that. But it's a shame you serve Mundus.
As Nelo Angelo then shows his true face as him being Vergil, but as you can see, it's corrupted Vergil, with the red glowing eyes, his white skin and blue veins over his face. Yet Dante doesn't recognize his brother, as he doesn't expect him to see there. So Vergil challenges Dante one last time, and though he has been granted with new powers by Mundus, Dante defeats him and he screams in pain as he disappears in a torrent of blue flames, leaving only his amulet behind. When Dante picks the amulet and looks at it, it clicks for him, as Dante realizes that Nelo Angelo was in fact Vergil, as it also clicks for him that this is what has become of him, as he served Mundus this whole time, as he probably thought on the time when he last saw him going into the Underworld. And notice that Vergil did not die, nor did he explode. He just disappeared, and nobody was left behind. So it doesn't mean that Vergil died in Devil May Cry 1.
Trish, Vergil has been defeated.
So right now, as you can see, Vergil is back, but he's still corrupted. And I'm convinced that this is still the brainwashed, corrupted Vergil that has absolutely no memories of his past whatsoever, well, at least to a certain degree, as of course some reminiscent memories are still there of who he is. As after all it took was one small trigger, as with the amulet of Dante, for his memories to come back. And secondly, I do believe that he isn't under the control of Mundus or anyone else. He basically has free will, but is certainly lost in a way, because he has no memories. After all, Trish was also the creation of Mundus, and she had control over her own even when Mundus was still alive. And since Mundus of course is long gone, I don't see how Vergil can be free of anyone's bidding. But that being said, suddenly things become much more interesting, as I do believe that while Vergil takes off Nero's arm, he has no memories of his past whatsoever besides his encounter with Dante, but I assume that he already has completely forgotten that he had a son, let alone that he hasn't seen Nero before either, or even know how he looks like. And the same of course applies to Nero as well, since he doesn't know who his father is, nor has he seen him. And he doesn't even know that he's related to them as well, and to Dante. So it makes things even more intense, as he already has a personal score to settle with him, since Vergil took off his arm. But then again, you could ask that, if corrupt Vergil has indeed no memory, then how could he have known the location of Nero, right? And how did he know that Yamato wasn't his Devilbringer? And how did he know that he needed it in the first place, if he has absolutely no memories and was brainwashed? Well, I simply believe that Vergil has sensed his Yamato blade and his powers, and that has led him to Nero's location. He simply wants to reclaim what was his to begin with, and it's very possible that from Yamato alone he was drawn to it by its powers. It could even possibly call them out. Remember how Nero said that his arm was talking to him? It was even that Yamato was drawn to Nero because after all, he was from Sparta's bloodline, and most importantly, he was Vergil's son, basically Vergil's blood as well. And Yamato was suddenly and magically restored by Nero's Devilbringer, and it accepted him as well. The same thing could have happened here, where corrupt Vergil sensed and heard a voice of his blade that led him to Nero's location, and exactly knew what he was searching for and where he needed to take it. It could be all possible. So then again, you may ask, how was corrupt Vergil able to come back from the Underworld, since the last time we saw him he disappeared and most likely went back to the Underworld in Devil May Cry 1? I think that it most likely happened during Devil May Cry 4, when the true Hell Gates were opened by Agnes in Fortuna City. As the gates opened, Vergil most likely must have come through it as well, as that would also explain how he got his cloak there, as we see him having it in the trailer. So he was literally in Fortuna City this whole time. As this is still the brainwashed, corrupted Vergil with no memories, I can imagine that it took some time for him to settle and wait. But as time passed by, he could sense something, and that was power. Power he needed. And sometime after Devil May Cry 4, when Nero established his mobile demon hunting agency, he must have waited for the right time and the right place to strike, and rip off his arm by surprise, and reclaim its powers back. as he most likely had observed Nero and could see that fighting him would be a bad idea, as he probably wasn't in his full capacity. And you can also see that it took Nero by complete surprise, as he didn't expect it at all, or nor did he sense him at all.
I need more power.
So with Vergil having Yamato and so his powers, what does he plan to do with it? Well, there are many possibilities to what can happen next, as we don't know much specifics yet, but I'm going to give you a few ideas and share my thoughts on them, on what I think possibly can happen. Remember, in my last video analysis I told you how the new demon villain could be related to Mundus, of him coming back or him being resurrected one way or another. Well, with Yamato obtained now, I assumed that he would get a large amount of his memory back and therefore realize what has happened since he fought Mundus in DMC3, and he could get revenge on him for what he did to him. That is of course if Mundus really returns, as he probably can sense his force. I've also said that the new demon villain could be a corrupted Sparta that's maybe under the control of an evil force that could be Mundus himself eventually. So it could be that Vergil, while getting Yamato back and so its powers and memory, he will eventually join Dante and Nero in fighting against their corrupted father to free him. But I can imagine that Vergil wants to take his own path and get Retribution on his own. Another possibility is that with him gaining Yamato back, he can purify and restore his soul to his normal self with the power that lays within the sword. After all, he's still corrupt and doesn't remember a lot. It will most likely awaken him, and it's very likely that he will remember a majority of his past as well, as his memories are coming back. But I just think that whatever may happen to Vergil after he gets the Yamato back, it will change him and make his memories come back, and will make him uncorrupt. But one thing is sure, and that's he will face against Nero, his son, which he doesn't know, as Nero will become an obstacle for him, since he wants to settle a score with him for what he did, as Nero himself has his own goals of regaining his lost pride and power. And as I mentioned, neither Vergil or Nero don't know their relationship with each other. Pretty much the only person that knows is most likely Dante, and that is since Devil May Cry 4. You see, although this hasn't been said by him, there are many hints given in Devil May Cry 4 that he pretty much figured out what's going on with Nero, with their several encounters they had. And also that he had the blood of Sparta, just like him, as he was used to open the true hellgates of Fortuna's city, which they initially planned to use Dante for that, since they didn't know that Nero was of Sparta's bloodline. And later on he fully realizes that he could be none other than his brother's son. And I think the biggest hints for us users is most likely when Dante says,
It's gotta stay in the family.
when he fights Nero for a second time, as he probably figured it out after seeing how Nero fights and seeing his face, realizing his devil trigger and seeing Nero's interaction with Yamato. Dante knows there is no way Sparta had another child besides him and Vergil, and also knows that he himself hasn't a kid as well. So right then he was probably like, yup, it's gotta be Vergil's son. Dante is clever, and he surely knows and wants that Yamato stays in the family, and the fact that he lets him keep it after the fight already says enough that Dante is figuring out that Nero is part of the family, as there is no way he would let a stranger keep his brother's sword.
That sword was used to separate our world from the demons. I can't have something of that kind of power floating around now, can I? It's gotta stay in the family.
That's why at the end he asks his name out of curiosity, to know his family. He knows it's going to be in good hands.
Hey! What's your name? Nero.
And at the end, when everything is over, he's very confident and relieved to let him keep Vergil's sword, as it's the only kind of gift worth giving. And who else to give his brother's sword than to his son, as after all, it's gotta stay in the family.
Keep it.
What? I thought this meant a lot to you.
That's the only kind of gift worth giving. I want to entrust it to you, so I am. What you do from here is your call.
And that's why Dante in Devil May Cry 5 is pretty much the only one who's able to interfere between Nero and Vergil, and pretty much the only one who's able to convince both of them that they are father and son. And I'm sure that Vergil's memories will start to come back as well during more encounters with Dante, and for him finding out the truth about his son, he will most likely join forces with Dante and Nero. Then again, as mentioned, he could take his own path of revenge against Mundus. And the last thing I want to talk about is Kyrie, as we don't know if she will be in the game. We hear Nero mentioning her in the trailer to get back inside.
Kyrie, get back inside now!
That something really bad might have happened to her during the prologue part, and in the worst case scenario it could have meant that she got killed by corrupt Vergil, as Nero is looking like this helpless as he couldn't do anything. But I don't want to jump to conclusions just yet on Kyrie's fate, as if this was really the case, I don't think that Nero would be all cool and happy as we see him in the trailer, especially during this part of the trailer where he says where he has a score to settle.
I've got a score to settle with that son of a bitch.
He's more expressing to what has happened to him and his arm rather than something to Kyrie. As if something would happen to Kyrie and her life depended on it, I think that he surely would be more emotional and angrier, as we have seen him in Devil May Cry 4, and went full nuclear, as he couldn't save Kyrie initially.
Kyrie! Kyrie! I swear it! I swear I'm gonna get us out of here! Together, Kyrie! Kyrie!
And what's also very interesting and a detail not that noticeable is that there seems to be dream catchers in Nero's DMC van, as these dream catchers are usually to scare off bad dreams and nightmares that they frequently have. So does it mean that Nero is haunted by the nightmare he has from the event where his arm is being ripped off, and eventually also from something that potentially could have happened to Kyrie? It's just a feeling I have, as it could mean that we don't see her in the game at all, besides in the prologue. And there you have it, guys. This was my Devil May Cry 5 character analysis and breakdown video. I hope you had a good one. But the most important thing is, what do you guys think of any of the topics, theories, and characters I've talked about in this video? Do you think that Vergil has indeed memory loss? Or is he fully conscious of him knowing who he is and what he's doing while he's ripping off Nero's arm? Will Nero eventually forgive him for what he did to his arm? Is Kyrie dead or alive? Did corrupt Vergil really attack her or not? And will Nero forgive him for that as well? Does Dante really know that Nero was Vergil's son after all? And will he be the one that makes a difference in Devil May Cry 5 and interferes between the two? Well guys, jump into the comment section below and let's have a great discussion with each other by leaving your own thoughts, opinions, and speculations. And remember guys, this isn't about being right or wrong, just sharing your own views and opinions with each other, with your own arguments that you have. And listen guys, while you're still here and enjoy the video, why don't you like and share the video, as that helps me greatly, and become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. And you can also find me on social media simply at YellowMotion for more news and personal updates. And that'll do it for me guys for this one. I hope you had a good one. Thanks a lot for being here and thanks a lot for watching. I see you guys in the next one. Peace.